My sister-in-law, who was like a sister to me, passed away. Thank you, I whispered to her, who lay in the casket with a gentle smile. Scattered flowers, numerous letters from the attendees. Suddenly, a few photographs caught my eye. And in that moment... What? I froze. The scene before me was impossible. What was there wasn't a gesture of mourning but pure malice. Who could have done this, and for what reason? Amidst the mourners quietly weeping, I instinctively glanced around. Then, I locked eyes with someone. A person stood there, arms crossed, smirking. In that instant, something my sister-in-law once said flashed through my mind.
If anything ever happens to me.
Without thinking, I dashed out of the funeral hall. The story goes back a little further. I am a 33-year-old housewife living with my husband David, whom I married 5 years ago, in a rented apartment in the suburbs. We have no children. Both David and I love children and have always wanted to have them, but I have never been pregnant. Concerned, we went to a hospital for a consultation, but neither of us had any particular health issues. So, for now, we are simply waiting to conceive naturally. There are times when I feel down about it, but overall, my married life with David is quite fulfilling. Being with David, who has a calm and gentle nature, brings me peace, and taking care of the household for him is a joy for me as a housewife. On weekends, we often go shopping or take trips together. Just these things alone make me feel glad to have married David, but there is one more reason I feel this way. That reason is the presence of David's sister, Nancy. Nancy is 2 years older than I am, and we have been close since I got married, mainly because Nancy and I share the same hobby. Both of us love intricate work, especially making jewelry and embroidering small items. I spend my free time between household chores, while Nancy fits it in between her work, and we enjoy our hobby together. Nancy is more skilled at handicrafts than I am, and whenever I have questions, she kindly offers advice without a hint of annoyance. She often shares her dinner with me or gives me brand name bags she no longer uses. She really takes good care of me. Nancy is also actively involved in volunteer work and often finds time to help others. I think of Nancy as if she were my own sister and truly admire her. Nancy, it's been a while. I brought the parts for the accessories we were going to make today.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm sorry for asking you to bring them.
Nancy replied apologetically as she welcomed me into her living room.
I ran out of time to go buy them myself because I had to go to the hospital.
Nancy has a chronic illness. Although we wouldn't notice it in her daily life, it's thanks to her regular checkups and medication. Don't worry about it, I replied, spreading the parts out on the table. The accessory we were going to make today would be particularly special for Nancy. It was something she would wear at her own wedding. A tiara adorned with pearls and beads. She had shown me the design sketch, and it was already stunning. I couldn't wait to see the real thing. Nancy currently has a fiancé, and their wedding is about 6 months away. I had been introduced to him before. He is quite handsome and also an elite graduate from a prestigious university. However, he is neither arrogant nor boastful, but rather humble and gentlemanly. I think he is a perfect match for Nancy, who is a person of such great character. As we were excitedly working together, the doorbell rang, signaling a visitor. Nancy immediately got up from her seat.
Just a moment.
glancing at the intercom monitor. But then she let out a displeased
Oh no.
and reluctantly headed toward the entrance. I continued with the work, assuming it was probably a salesman. A short while later, I heard the footsteps of several people walking noisily down the hallway. The living room door opened, and there stood my father-in-law.
Oh, Kathy, isn't it? It's been quite a while. For a daughter-in-law, you sure don't show your face often. Must be nice to have such a carefree life.
He sneered as soon as he saw me, frowning.
Hey, Dad, what are you doing here? Don't tell me you're here to ask for money again. I'm not lending you anything anymore. And of course, neither is David.
It seemed he had let himself in without permission. Nancy interjected sharply as she hurried back into the living room, clearly having followed him in. Since our marriage, David and I had only met my in-laws a few times, despite them living nearby. In reality, we were practically estranged from them. The reason was that they were greedy and extravagant, constantly pestering their children for money.
That's cold, coming from family. Aren't you marrying some high-flying elite from a big corporation? Then lending me a little money wouldn't hurt, would it? Oh, I know. Hey, Kathy.
He continued, his voice suddenly turning syrupy sweet.
You'll lend me some money, won't you? I don't know when I'll be able to pay it back, but it's okay, right? After all, you're the daughter-in-law, so you should be filial.
Well, that's... I stammered, caught off guard by his request directed at me. Before I could say anything more, Nancy stepped in.
Stop it! Don't drag Kathy into this mess. Now, please, just leave already.
She said firmly, grabbing her father's shoulder and forcibly pushing him back towards the entrance. The front door slammed shut with a loud bang, and Nancy immediately returned.
I'm sorry for having such a troublesome parent.
She apologized, looking sad and bowing her head. Nancy, there's nothing for you to apologize for. I'm not bothered at all. Come on, let's get back to our work, okay? I said cheerfully, trying to lift the mood. Finally, a smile returned to Nancy's face. Having such difficult parents brings a lot of hardship to their children. Despite this incident, Nancy's tiara was slowly coming together. We were just one step away from completing it, but that step was never to be taken. Because Nancy suddenly passed away. It was just 1 month before the wedding. I didn't fully understand the details, not being knowledgeable about medicine, but it seems a seizure, one of the symptoms of her chronic illness, had occurred, and she wasn't able to manage it. Normally, when she had a seizure, she could calm it down by taking her medication, but that time, it seemed she didn't have the medication she always carried with her. When I heard of Nancy's death, I couldn't quite feel sadness. It was all so sudden that I couldn't fully grasp the situation. Slowly, however, the reality began to sink in, and I found myself overwhelmed with grief, unable to hold back my tears. But I couldn't just remain sad. We had to prepare for the funeral. David, being her younger brother, was set to be the chief mourner. Ordinarily, it would be the spouse or the parents who would take on this role, but Nancy had not yet registered her marriage, and her parents were completely unhelpful, only talking about the life insurance money. I couldn't help but question their sanity, considering how they could only discuss money when their own daughter had just passed away. I even found myself wondering if they had somehow wanted Nancy gone for the insurance payout. That's how appalling their behavior was. Despite some trouble, many people who had admired Nancy during her lifetime attended the funeral. Nancy had been loved by so many. Thinking of this made my heart ache, and I almost started crying again. I held back my tears, pressing my fingers to my eyes. I knew that constantly mourning would not bring Nancy peace. As I was thinking that, Kevin, Nancy's fiancé, who had red eyes from crying, approached me.
Kathy, it's been a while. I never thought we would end up having a funeral instead of a wedding.
He said, his voice filled with exhaustion and pain. I'm truly sorry for your loss. I know it's difficult, but please try not to let it get to you too much. At least make sure to eat and sleep properly. Kevin responded in a barely audible voice.
Yes.
And then collapsed into a nearby chair. Try not to let it get to you too much. I realized I wasn't one to talk. To find closure, I decided to open the coffin one last time and say a final goodbye to Nancy. I felt certain that Nancy would want me to do so. Nancy, lying in the coffin, looked as if she were simply sleeping. Nancy, thank you for everything. I whispered and was about to close the coffin when I noticed something placed next to her face. A photo? We had placed a few mementos in the coffin so Nancy could take them with her to heaven, but I didn't remember placing any photos. Curious, I discreetly picked it up. The moment I saw the photographs, I gasped in shock, letting out a small cry. Quickly, I covered my mouth. The pictures showed Kevin entering a hotel with a woman I didn't recognize. My mind raced with questions. Who put these here? Why? Were these photos even real? With these doubts swirling in my mind, I cautiously glanced at Kevin. Noticing my gaze, Kevin flashed a brief smirk. The expression, so out of character from his earlier grief-stricken demeanor, was chilling. His eyes were fixed on the photos in my hand. Seeing his expression, I realized that Kevin had placed these photos in the coffin. He must have intended to burn them along with Nancy's body, to destroy the evidence. Or perhaps it was to torment Nancy, or whoever found them. What is this? What are you trying to do? I demanded, moving toward Kevin, unable to contain myself. Kevin chuckled softly.
You found them, huh? What can I say? It's exactly what it looks like. That woman, she claimed to have a quiet hobby like handicrafts, but she wasn't quiet at all. She even dared to defy me, an elite with a good face. Of course, I decided to go for a kind, younger, and more obedient girl.
His words made my blood run cold. Well, no way. So, because of that, Nancy became a nuisance to you, and... I stammered. Kevin smiled brightly and said,
I wonder why she didn't have her medication with her right when a seizure happened.
At that, I couldn't help but scream. People around us turned, startled, and gathered in confusion. This man, he did something to Nancy. I pointed at Kevin, my finger trembling uncontrollably. Kevin responded with a calm expression.
What are you talking about, Kathy? Are you feeling a little tired? I have my car here today. I could drive you home.
He offered nonchalantly, grabbing my arm. I instinctively shook off his hand and dashed out of the funeral hall. I could hear Kevin calling after me, but I ignored him and kept running. I was scared of him, but there was another reason I ran. I remembered something Nancy had said to me before she died.
If anything happens to me, check under the closet.
At the time, I thought it was just a joke, but now I realized it was an urgent message from Nancy. Nancy's house wasn't far away. I grabbed my heels in my left hand to make it easier to run and dialed my phone with the other. I called the police. I couldn't let someone like him roam free. He needed to face the proper consequences. The police didn't sound particularly concerned, but they agreed to head to the funeral hall. I had to hurry too. I ran with all my might and finally reached Nancy's house. There was no need to worry about the key, I already had a spare one. I opened the front door and headed straight for the bedroom where the closet was. The closet was immediately to the right as I entered the room. I crouched down on the wooden floor, peering underneath the closet. There was something white there. I reached in and pulled it out. An envelope. I quickly opened it, and inside were extra copies of the photos I had seen earlier and a voice recorder. It was solid evidence of Kevin's affair. Clutching these items, I sprinted back toward the funeral hall. On the way, I decided to play the voice recorder to check its contents. This is. By the time I arrived at the funeral hall, the police were already there, with a police car parked in the lot. As I entered, everyone's eyes turned toward me. Kevin was speaking with the police near Nancy's casket.
As I said, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything. She passed away due to her illness. Maybe the call was just a prank or an attempt to harass me. There isn't any proof, after all. If you're going to make such accusations, then bring some evidence.
The police, appearing to believe Kevin's words, replied,
Well, we only came because there was a call. That's all.
And with a reluctant smile, they seemed ready to leave. Wait. I have the evidence right here. I shouted, stepping onto a nearby chair and pressing the play button on the voice recorder I had brought.
How could you cheat on me? The wedding is so soon, and you betray me like this.
Shut up! It's because you're not cute enough. It's not my fault.
I have proof of your affair. Should I send these photos to your company? If you end it with her now, I'll forgive you. Please, come back to me.
If you do that, you know what will happen, right? You won't live to see another day.
Nancy and Kevin's voices reverberated throughout the funeral hall. The rawness of the conversation left everyone stunned and utterly silent. David was the first to break the silence.
You! How could you do that to my sister?
This prompted the attendees to start shouting, one after another, hurling insults at Kevin. He stammered,
What? It's her fault. It's not my fault. She didn't listen to me.
A commotion was on the verge of breaking out when one of the police officers, who had been watching from the sidelines, blew his whistle. The sharp sound cut through the air, and the crowd settled slightly. The officer, seeing the moment, then spoke.
Could you come with us to the station for further questioning?
His tone had shifted from reluctant to commanding, and he now glared at Kevin with intensity. The attendees, following his lead, all turned their glares toward Kevin as well. Realizing he couldn't escape, Kevin muttered in frustration,
Damn it!
his shoulders slumping in defeat. Some time later, Kevin was arrested. Even after being taken into custody, Kevin stubbornly refused to admit his guilt, but in the end, he couldn't escape the police's relentless questioning. As I was informed by the officers, when Nancy had her seizure, it was because Kevin, who was with her, snatched her medication and threw it away. How could someone do something so cruel? I don't want to think of him as a human being. I wish he would stay behind bars forever, but he'll probably be out in a few years. To protect me from any possible retaliation once Kevin is released, David decided to request a transfer, and we moved far away. This incident also led us to completely sever ties with his awful parents, who cared only about money, even after their own daughter died. I don't think we'll ever see them again. At first, moving to a new place where I knew no one was challenging, but now I've made new friends who share my love for crafts, and I'm enjoying my new life. And there was another piece of good news. I found out that a new life is growing inside me. We don't know the gender yet, but the name is already decided. Whether it's a boy or a girl, we'll name them Tracy, a name similar to Nancy's, whom I admire so much. I'm sure Nancy must have felt deep regret to be betrayed by the one she loved and have her life end halfway through. So I have resolved to live my life fully, for both of us. That is my vow. How did you like this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.